Now, the next panel, this is an announcement to get the panel members to come and join us. So René's going to have to break off conversations. Mark Taylor is always late, and Gio is the most efficient guy, so he's going to be first on stage. Somehow I am part of this as well. This started in a conversation a while ago. Come and sit down on stage, René. You're not going to hide in the audience. As an industry, we're very focused on better materials, better practice. And Gio actually pointed out there's a vast discrepancy between the buzzwords that we're using and what people really understand. And that really shocked me. And then I had a conversation with him based off the principle of what I thought I knew, and I realized how outdated I was. So I'm going to be the dumb one on the panel. But we're now going to look at, especially with the incoming compliance, that we need to know where our better practice is. We need to be able to identify things. So we sent out a questionnaire to both industry leaders, to people who produce product at this show, and also the brands. And we have grouped their answers separately to show different levels of knowledge. So I'm going to shut up now, and my colleague's going to take over. Hopefully, it's going to run to plan. But this is looking at the information you have given us on what you understand. And there are some worrying areas. There's some really good areas. There are also some worrying areas. So if I sit down and let you take us through the next stage.
Do I take this? Okay. Thank you, Charles. This is the title. Thanks again for joining this this session. Before I start, apart from the name, I just want to present myself on who I am and what I work for. Again, the name is Giovanni Henssen. I'm part of what René already mentioned in his previous discussion. I'm part of the chemical industry. Okay, so our company, named Fibrant, we are a global leader of making nylon 6. More specifically, I'm part of the Netherlands branch of the company called Fibrant. And in Fibrant in the Netherlands, we produce the monomer to make nylon 6. Chemically, it's called caprolactam. Probably 90% of you guys never heard of what caprolactam is, but that makes nylon, okay? And only nylon. And nylon can only be made out of one thing, and that's caprolactam. So in that sense, I'm in the nylon business. We make one special grade, caprolactam, and we call that ecolactam. And ecolactam, we make that in a very, very sustainable way in the Netherlands, in such a way that makes it the footprint of this product about 70% lower than regular nylon. Okay, that's our business. You see some numbers here, 250 kilotons of this ecolactam, this ultra-low footprint monomer. On top of that, we make another 1.5 megaton of regular product. In the end, we can provide the market with about 1.5 megatons of nylon, yarn, chips, or whatever is needed. So much for the advertisement and promotion. Why we're here? Charles already pointed out that a questionnaire was sent out to you guys, I'm not sure you specifically, but industry leaders, as Charles mentioned it, exhibitors, brand owners. And actually, when me and my colleague were sitting in the audience filming me here, we were here for the last couple of years, and we thought, okay, this is a great crowd. First of all, it's a great show, many knowledgeable people here, so let's make use of this crowd and ask them how they see sustainability, what is important to them, and how do you see the future, because I think this is of interest to all of us. And what you see... Sorry?
But before we go into detail, I actually want to let these two introduce themselves.
Oh, sure.
Because we found people who know more than Gio and us. So, René, we've just heard you in the last session, but can you repeat for the crew who you are and what qualifies you to be on stage?
Yes, hello, I'm René Bethman. I'm coming from Germany and I'm working at VAUDE, so it's a German outdoor sports outfitter. I'm working as a senior innovation manager and as a consultant for our VAUDE Academy, so we're also offering consultancy services, workshops for the whole industry, but also mainly we have right now other industries like automotive industry, where we're doing consultancy services. And what qualifies me, I don't know, actually. So I'm working for some time in the industry. I guess it's now over 17 years. And I was also on the very, very, very first performance days, which ever happened. And yeah. And
15 years ago. I'll tell you what qualifies you. It's when someone like me shuts up to listen because you're actually educating me. And these lot think I know a little bit more than them. I know you know more than me. But Mark, introduce yourself and why I've dragged you here.
Hiya, I'm Mark. Mark Taylor. I work at the University of Leeds. I teach undergraduate students about sustainability and fashion. And if we're selling stuff, we also offer training courses to industry, if anybody's interested. We did a really big course for a huge European fashion brand recently. So if you're interested in educating all your staff, come and see us. We can sort that out for you.
Would that have been a Spanish fashion brand?
I couldn't possibly comment.
Good to hear. Mark, you might be aware, has done a lot of the testing and compliance to legislation. His biggest claim is that he's very hands-in with the microfiber consortium. He was one of the main pushers of the wash test that we're adopting as an industry that's up for ISO consideration. If you weren't here in the last hour, René is basically our industry specialist on biomaterials.
So that ISO standard was passed in January this year, so it's now a real standard. So if love it or hate it, I am largely responsible for it, or me and my team, so don't beat me up.
So we now know who to blame. But Gio, back to you. Come on.
Okay, back to the, let's say, survey. As I said, we tried to make use of this great crowd, and we send out this survey and this questionnaire to, I don't know how many people, but I do know that about 250 people responded to this survey. The division of people, like Charles said, brand owners, manufacturers, everybody who's involved in this industry. All regions were covered, of course, with a little bit of a focus on Europe. 50% of our respondents were from Europe, but also Asia, Pacific, and North America were represented. And through the whole value chain. So all different roles: innovation, fabric development, sustainability managers, product managers, sales and marketing. So we have a broad cross-section of the industry with a clear view on what we were all interested in. Now, going through the first question, these are the questions that were asked and the results, okay? The first question was...
Gio, can I just put you on pause for a moment? Does anyone remember filling out the questionnaire that came out? So we do have people who filled out the questionnaire. The rest of you, I'm going to make you feel guilty. We needed better information. The next time we send it out, read your... I know Performance Day sends you too many emails and you don't open them all. If you participate, our quality of information goes out. So the first gold star goes to Thomas over there, who volunteered that he's done the survey. Back to you, Gio.
Okay, good. Now, because I think it's really indeed valuable. The more response we get, the more valuable this gets. I must also admit, we tried to pick up as many responses up until literally last night. So this presentation is really not covering everything. Okay, it's the most important part. Afterwards, at the show, we will actually elaborate a little bit more on the response and give you more detailed information. Okay, everything will be shared.
We can talk to you about a whole range of things, but we would bore you if we went through every question, which is what he's saying. So just the more dramatic stuff is what Gio is going to talk about.
Exactly. Now, the first question is how much of the categories you see here on the screen contribute to your current sustainability target, your corporate social response? Not a big surprise. You see a big red bar under recycled materials. There is a fairly big bar on bio-based or low footprint materials. No surprise that everybody, as we sit here, is very much focused on recycled materials. On second place, bio-based and low-impact materials, low-carbon footprint materials. And there is a bunch up there in gray. There's at least 50 other things that can actually contribute to our sustainability targets. And those will be shared later on. We want to focus now a little bit on the three bars that I mentioned here. The second question was, if today it's more than 50% recycled materials contribute to your CSR, how do you see that in 5 years from now? Okay, and that was the second question. So if you look at recycled materials, bio-based in the middle and low footprint materials on the right, you see that the majority, more than 50 to 60%, thinks that recycled materials will become more than 50% of their total volume, okay, of their total portfolio.
So just to restate for the colours, the grey bar are the people at the top of the industry. The red bar are the exhibitors here. The blue bar are you lot, the visitors.
Yeah, the visitors, sorry.
And the good news is that we start with a reasonably similar answer. Then it goes.
Yes. So thanks for that, Charles. I forgot that. But indeed, the 3 bars represent the 3 groups. And I will go into detail if the bars are significantly different. So far, everything seems to be aligned. Okay. So everybody keeps on thinking that for the future, recycled materials will become even more important, play a more important role in our business. On bio-based, you see the conclusion I draw there, it's also going to grow, okay? But to a lesser extent maybe than the recycled materials. And the same for low footprint materials. It's also going to grow. It's going to be more important. And we'll get back to that as well. But still a lot of focus on the 3 things. And it will be more important.
And can we pull out that first one on bio-based? The leaders of the industry, so go back a slide, please. The leaders of the industry, so I'm talking about the top central ones, aren't really interested in bio-based. The exhibitors have a healthy interest, so 25% in 5 years' time. The visitors, you guys, are far more switched on than actually the leaders of the industry, which I thought was out of kilter. But if I give it back to you, the rest I thought was predictable, but I was chuffed that obviously the quality of visitors is better than who's exhibiting.
Yeah, and that's a different perspective where they come from, exactly. If we move to the next question, which is actually also part of the title of this session, to what extent are you familiar with all the legislation that's coming to us over the next few years, or literally maybe even next year, and that's under the umbrella of the Green Deal? You must have heard about the Green Deal. And underneath the Green Deal, there is a bunch of directives, legislation, everything that we need to comply with, okay? So we better be aware of it, you know, and be ready for it. But if you ask that question, you see the big bar in the middle, to some extent, you know, there's not a big difference between the three different groups. People are to some extent aware of what's coming up. The bottom line, there's a big difference. Lucky, there is a big difference. Let's say the brand owners, the leaders, they are more aware of what's coming than maybe some of us, which is good, But to me, it's still a concern that the majority does not know at all what's coming up, or to some extent. And the impact can be quite serious if you miss on the detail, okay?
If I mention it's 2025, when it's due to come in, I don't want to scare you guys, but that's why you should be more aware of it now.
Yeah. So there is a lot to, let's say, to learn, okay? And it's part your own responsibility to get into it, all right? And and let yourself hear if you well, disagree is the wrong word here, but the lawmakers, if that's the right word, they need the input from us to make correct laws. Otherwise, they make stupid, sorry for that, laws that cannot be implemented or we cannot comply with, okay?
They have run several consultations recently on their circularity plans. Did anybody contribute?
Yes.
Ah, good.
2.
Can we have a second gold star, please?
See?
And you can tell who the teacher is.
Without your feedback, they will make decisions you might not like.
Yeah.
So you should get involved.
Yeah, I also would like to add on that, because I'm doing a bit of lobbying work together with the Renewable Carbon Initiative in Brussels. And I see that there are not many people lobbying there for it, and that like the policy makers are making kind of regulations which are so far almost impossible to fulfill, because they're often not allowing the tools what you need to fulfill those ambitious goals.
Right.
So it's your turn to scare the audience now.
What?
You're terrifying the audience. Treat them carefully. These are the keen ones who have turned up.
No, in the end, I don't want to terrify anybody, but it's just like also the call just to be engaged actually in the lobbying work, because we're living in the European Union, or some of us are living in the European Union.
Some of
right?
us sell to the European Union.
Yes, and it's a good system actually, where everybody can raise a voice also, and also has a voice actually, and the policymakers are listening. This is also what I learned. So also Cabinet of Franz Timmermans listening to you actually, and they are willing to understand. So, but if there is nobody to speak up, then yeah, then just the big companies, the big oil companies in the end are making the game.
So,
And then some other people I want to leave out of that.
but one of the problems with a country that leaves is, if you want to sell into the union, you have to still comply with all of its regulations and directives, but you've lost your voice, which is a shame. But you could always still join the EOG and speak to Katie, and she can be there to represent you or other people, but don't ignore it. Do get involved. It will bite you on the bum.
We're going to go back to Gio.
The next question was,
I told him before we started, if he had 3 grumpy men on stage, he'll never get through the presentation. We're just going to make sarcastic comments.
doesn't matter. Anyway, those who were aware, we asked, okay, these are some of the aspects, that is coming up to it. So the biggest concern, what is your biggest concern if it comes down to this legislation? There you see some differences already. We'll go to that. But the top number one is transparency. Transparency means prove your claim, okay? That also links to the this one here, the green claims. There's something coming up like the green claim code. You cannot just state, this is recyclable, because everything is recyclable if you do a lot of effort, put a lot of money in it, but recycle it in an industrial way. So there you see a big difference. Transparency is just getting proofs for your claim. That's one big fear. Because how do I going to prove if I don't get the proof delivered from my suppliers? That, again, links back to the Green Claim Code, where you see, not a surprise, brand owners being more concerned about this than, for example, the manufacturers, because those are the ones who are going to put the claim towards the consumer. And those will be protected with this Green Claim Code. So yes, they need to do something, they need to claim something, but they need also the transparency and the proof, which is sometimes lacking. So we understand those. And the one in the middle, the manufacturers, they're more worried about the fact that they get an obligation to use a certain amount of recycled material, right? While it's not always available in the quality that the brand owners want. We all know recycled materials, that's the way to go, that's the way forward, but it's still not at the level always, okay, not always, where the quality consistency is there, or etc., or the availability, or the price. So those are more the concerns of the manufacturers. Same as for the carbon tax, because that's what they're dealing with. So there you see a big difference. Brand owners more worried about the end of the value chain, the claim, and how to support that claim, while the man in the middle are more concerned about the availability and the price of the obligation to use recycled content. Then something which is maybe not known here, and I will not try to explain what's here, or maybe a chain of custody. Just raise your hand if you even know what chain of custody means. I just want to check if, okay, 5, 6, 7 people. Oh, no, even more, 10. Okay, not bad. Not bad, because it's not easy. Out of these, identity preserve, physical segregate, control blending, and you can read the screen up until book and claim. The question was, are you aware of anything? Not surprising, 30% was not even aware of any of these of these models. Okay, the one that sticks out is, of course, probably all of you have ever heard of that, the mass balance. Okay, the mass balance method. Everybody kind of at least heard about that. We can debate about whether it's understood, the detail.
And can I put you on pause there? Because we all have heard of mass balance, but we don't really know the detail. The colleague on my left now gave me such a simple introduction when we were talking about electricity supply. René, can I ask you to explain in terms we will understand what mass balance is?
Electricity is something else, but that's book and claim. But no, so I will try to explain it as easy as possible and on example on nylon 6 for you, Joe.
Thank you, René.
Yeah. So identity preserved is a thing what more or less every brand owners wants. So that's actually if they are buying nylon 6 from a certain kind of supplier. So this supplier have one stream. So it's one stream which goes along the entire value chain where you all, so along the entire value chain, you can see, okay, it's always this nylon 6. This sustainable nylon 6. Putting like this sustainable nylon 6, which goes in there. The segregation.
Let's say, sorry to interrupt, from the chemical,
from the very
to the yarn,
from
to the fabric, to the jacket,
from the oil,
to the shore, from the oil,
so from the oil
to retail. Okay?
Yeah, from the oil to the retail, or let us say like, yeah, it's existing on a demo scale, but from the bio-based, putting it like this, from the bio-based feedstock to the final product or to the customer in the end. So that would be like the identity preserved. The segregation would be if you have two streams. So you have one fossil stream and you have one bio-based stream. And that goes also into the system, into the facility, and you always can actually see, okay, which line is which. Which line is now the fossil route and which line is now the bio-based route. That's also something what the brand owners usually want. That's also something what in the past always Textile Exchange wanted and just certified. That you always can have like a track, so which stream it's coming from. Controlled blending is not really according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in that, so I'm just skipping it. So the mass balance in the end, it's you got a fossil stream and you got, for instance, a bio-based stream in the very beginning, but it comes then into a system, like a factory, which is then your boundary. So that's your system boundary. Meaning in the end, like when you're exchanging like the fossil naphtha with the bio naphtha, it goes then into the steam cracker. So where you're cracking then the long carbon chains actually into smaller carbon chains, and then you're making chemical intermediates and then caprolactam in the end. And because this steam cracker is like a quite big machine, you cannot really separate those different input streams. So those two input streams are going into the system and they're being mixed in the end. And in the end, you get like a mix out of it. So in the end, you cannot anymore see what is now the bio-based part and what is now the fossil part. Usually, so you see up to now still mostly the fossil part in it because just a partial amount goes from the bio-based feedstock in. So for this, you need a kind of certification. A certification which proves you that the amount you allocating, which is an often 100%, went into the system from the bio-based feedstock. And it's also limited to this certain kind of factory facility. The book and claim is quite similar, but then it's not limited to a specific facility, factory. And the book and claim is quite easy explained with renewable energy. Because when you're saying you're using renewable energy, 100% renewable energy at home, it's not only renewable energy, because there's also from in Germany now coal and gas, and just a bit also, and more of a renewable energy. But it's not 100%. Just by the certifications you are buying then with your provider, then you say that somewhere in this grid renewable energy came in, and the amount is then 100% or the equivalent to 100%. Often it's a bit more because you have some process losses in the end on the way.
Can I just simplify it even a little bit more?
Is it still complicated or not?
Still complicated.
No. I was going to say the presentation will be uploaded by the end of the month. If you didn't get it the first time, play René back. When you listen the second time, it's actually clearer. But so you can play back. Don't expect to understand this 100% first time of hearing if this is your first time looking at chain of custody models.
Yeah, Correct. It's not easy, and therefore it's not a surprise that people, let's say, are a bit shaky about it. But it's the belief that we will need this type of chain of custody models. René already referred to the book and claim, which is valid for the renewable energy. If you ask for renewable energy at your company, a certain amount of money will be invested somewhere to put windmills down. The more we as a consumer demand renewable energy, the more money will be invested to build windmills somewhere. You know, you're not literally connected with a cable to the windmill, okay? But that's what we do in the business here. We like to be connected to that bale of cotton somewhere in the middle of Pakistan and know that this jacket was coming from that bale. That is on a large scale impossible. Okay?
Your customers, though, they don't always understand this. So they're all happy with the electrical supply book and claim. But if you explain to somebody in a supermarket that that bag of fair trade sugar they're buying was done on a mass balance model, so there's no guarantee that there's any fair trade sugar in that bag, then they get upset. So if they're buying a jacket made from nylon made with recycled car tyres, there's no guarantee there's any car tyre in that jacket, and the customer can sometimes get very wound up about this. There's nothing wrong with the system. There's no other way to make these things, but customers don't get it.
Yeah, but sorry, just to add on this, because that's a really good point here with the sugar now. You all know the fair trade sugar. You all know, especially like with the cocoa and chocolate, for example, you know, the fair trade chocolate, that's usually always mass balance, because the cocoa, the fair trade cocoa in the chocolate is not really like this real fair trade cocoa, just to some extent. But the customer is not caring about that. They are just accepting it. Meaning, like with renewable energy.
But they care if you tell them. That's the problem.
Yeah, now you care, huh? But you see, so we have the acceptance on book and claim on renewable energy. We have the acceptance on mass balance in the food sector, which I personally find even more critical. But we don't have the acceptance all over when it comes to chemicals and when it comes to synthetics. And in the end, it will not change anything for you. You not have a worse material. You will not have a more polluting material. It's basically more or less the same in the end. Just the raw feedstock. It's changed.
Right. I think it's becoming obvious why we are having this panel. Why Gio identified quite successfully. These are terms which we are using going forward. And if we don't understand what we're saying, it's going to add to the confusion. Mark has been doing a lot of work in this end, and he's bringing in some really good reflections about the customer confusion. We are liable to add to the amount of confusion. You need to know the correct language, and we had some very good sessions yesterday with speakers talking about microplastics when they did not mean microplastics. We were talking about fiber fragmentation. This is what we're trying to do. But to pass back to you, before we get too bogged down.
Exactly. No, well, doesn't matter.
When are we supposed to finish?
Yeah, exactly. Now, this actually confirms what we've just been debating about. Do you agree that mass balance model for recycled or sustainable feedstock will improve the sustainability on a global scale, right? Yes, say about 30 to 40%. And then not convinced, don't know, never considered, not sure, right? It's the other 60%. It's technically representing what we just hear. And why is that? Because my personal opinion is that there's a lot of unclarity about this whole mass balance, what it actually means and what it can do for us, right? Because that is maybe more important. What it means was, one, understanding it and how it can help us growing the sustainable part of our business. Now, summarizing all this.
Hold on, can we just go back to that last one, please? Okay. Charles is going to shout up again. Now, I know Gio's far more technical than me. I looked at this from a comprehension point of view. I was not worried. I saw the top column, yes, it's a must. I was not worried that the I don't know and never considered are at that stage currently. I have faith in you all. I believe that you will realise, yes, it's a must. Gio, on the other hand, your conclusion was only 40% was on track. Yes, this is where we differ in opinions, and it highlights to me possibly it's a role for performance days. national governing bodies, we know we need to get the language correct and we need to pay attention.
No, but actually that is what it says. It needs more explanation. It needs more understanding. Because I'm with you. I mean, I'm not saying that these don't believe, but they need to be educated. Okay?
20% of not convinced, they need convincing, don't they?
Yeah, you need to convince them by explaining them. And I'm not sure if this was effective enough, but I would encourage you just to Google it and see what it means, and then you hopefully will understand.
I also would like to add on this here on the claims, because that was also when we introduced the mass balancing system at VAUDE, it was the most complex part of how we're making the claims, how we're making the communication. So we have found then for the recycled feedstock a very not that cool word like mass balance recycling, and explain it very much in detail. So, but in future it might be a bit more easier. Yeah. Like when you're using bio-based feedstock, in the beginning you can say maybe bio-attributed. That's the difficult part in the end, because you not can say it is made out of bio-based materials, because you cannot measure it with a C40 method. You cannot measure the bio-based content, and that's now like this the mind shifting what we need right now. That there are two ways in the end. Yeah. And one good news I can share, I cannot share all the details, but it's like 1 week old, I guess you also maybe not knowing it, that the good news is that there will come good news for the mass balance from the European Commission, which will all help us in the end here when it comes to making claims and regulations. Yeah. Also, and also to fulfill the quotas, upcoming quotas.
But before you say something, Charles, may I say something? No, I think building on what René just said, I think we have to differentiate, because people like to scan, like René said with a C40 method, okay, this jacket is made out of XYZ, be it recycled, bio-based, whatever. And with the mass balance model, you cannot always do that. And I think René explained that very well. I just want to point out to one example where you make a difference between putting, let's say, a sustainability label on a jacket, on a product, and René knows exactly what I'm doing, because that's what VAUDE is doing, putting that sustainability label on the brand or on the company. Okay, and I think IKEA, I just want to throw out the example, IKEA is doing that very well. They claim as a company that they use 10% recycled cotton in their portfolio all around the globe, okay, as far as they're everywhere. Not in that specific cushion or that specific couch or whatsoever. There's not always a label that says 10%. No, we as IKEA take a responsibility. We put at least 10% recycled cotton in all our products, okay? And I think that's the difference, what we're looking at. If you don't afraid to make a claim on a garment because you cannot prove that its actual product is in there, coming back to mass balance, put that tag on your company or on your brand, because it's the same importance. Now you, Charles.
No, you've actually made the point I was going to do, so I'm happy.
Okay, now, I'm not sure if we have time to read through this, but what's on the screen here, you will see it. It's just the conclusions of what we just said. So I will not go there point by point. I think in the meantime you could have read them. And so maybe it's now time for questions? Or
remember, this presentation's uploaded, so you'll see the slides without the three of us appearing as backdrops on them. So initially, dare I ask this, has this panel made sense? Has the bickering made sense? Do you guys want to ask us some questions on this very subject of the language that we're using associated to CSR within this industry? Are any of the conclusions put up from the findings of the survey, was anyone really shocked? I mean, there was the middle section where I saw that the actual exhibitors, the mills, were a lot more on the subject than either the brands or the brand owners, which made me really chuffed. But they were only 50% on it.
Yeah.
So we're halfway there. But yeah, it's a chance to ask questions. And if you don't want to ask questions publicly, if you don't want to admit that you only know as much as me, I know that the three of them will stay around this area after the presentation, so you can have one-to-one words with them, and they can help you through. And René will sign you up to the VAUDE Academy course. You won't be the first other brand to do the VAUDE Academy course, just making a point about it.
Other courses do exist.
Well, look, if you're not going to ask questions, I'm going to ask questions on behalf of them. So if I go back to what you put up originally, Gio, about 50% of the future, the 5 years' time, so if we go back to that slide really early on, was recycled materials. So if we go on to the next slide in 5 years' time, I was disappointed by what I saw in bio-based materials and also low footprint materials. Mm-hmm. How have we got to change our thinking, would you say? What other influences do we need? We're in a good place relatively on recycled materials. Why aren't we on bio-based or low footprint ones?
Well, let me put it this way. On recycled materials, we all know, right, there's a big drive to increase the amount of recycled materials, which is great. And I think every company is working on that. The unfortunate fact is that the demand for synthetics is far more than what the industry or the market can deliver on recycled materials. And again, this is the way to go, but it will take at least a decade, if not 2 or 3, before we can fill all the capacity. If we think about, there's 120 megaton of synthetics in textiles, and there's only a fraction of that available as a recycled material. So we can't replace just tomorrow one with the other, okay? So that is good. So there is still technology to be developed, and I think René said it a half an hour ago as well. There still need to be chemical recycle factories to be built, right, to supply the market. So that is one. And in the meantime, I think, why is there not enough, let's say, attention for a solution which can be done tomorrow, like low footprint, low sustainable materials? I mentioned one of them, which is our product, happens to be our product, Ecolactal. But there is probably a lot of what needs to happen, the discussion we just had, okay? Explaining to the market that it is as good to use a very low footprint material than a recycled material at scale, okay? So how do we pass it on to the market? That needs to change. The adoptance of models like mass balance, that needs to change, because that can drive the volume up on low footprint, maybe, but also on bio-based materials.
It's interesting looking at that though, isn't it? And everybody thinks the future is recycled, and obviously it's a big part of the future. But, and this is what addressed in the panel that René was on earlier, where are the garments made? Where do you have to do the recycling? Mm-hmm. So we've got to take the garments in Europe and the States and other places, and that's where it's got to be recycled, because you can't send your waste garments to China. They won't take it anymore. So you make a load of recycled chip here. What do you do with it? Recycling is a complicated story that's not very straightforward. Yeah. And the EU is trying to remove the main feedstock for recycled polyester from the market, isn't it? The bottle industry wants the bottles back. They want to turn them into bottles. And 99% of the recycled polyester you buy now is made from bottles. So
it's 98.2%.
And what we all want is textile to textile recycling, right? And coming back to chemical recycle or mechanical recycling, textile is very critical. We all know that, okay? If you want to make 20 denier yarns, high-speed spinning, including the dye pickup and everything we want as a high-quality garment, it needs high-quality product. It needs a high-quality, chemically recycled polyester or nylon. Otherwise, there's no way. And that, if we talk about textile to textile, yes, we have to go to monomaterial. Yes, we have to design for circularity. That will take some time. Is that an utopia? How you call it? Is that the right word? Maybe yes, maybe no. But there's still technology to develop how we can break down that textile to make it available for large-scale chemical recycling.
As somebody in this audience reminded me yesterday, the things being recycled now were made 20 years ago. And they potentially have things in them that you probably don't want.
Yeah.
And then I also would like to add, because as textile exchange, as textile recycling is now a new buzzword, a new hype word, where we need to go. It's so important. We still compare it a bit with a single plastic packaging recycling. So, and that's the difficult part, because single-use plastic packaging has for some extents, yeah, so the demand, so it's okay, but in the end, it's like a constant cycle, I would say. So you're just using it one time, you're putting it back into the loop, and it's been again and again, more or less. On textiles, we won't that have the system that you're using your clothes just one time and then throwing them away and putting them in a cycle. But this is actually going to happen when we're just focusing on recycling, because we need the demand, and already with the existing textile recycling, chemical textile recycling systems commercially which are in place, we still have the huge challenge of getting feedstock. We just don't get or they don't get the feedstock actually for the capacity. So technically it's possible, also in Asia especially, it's commercially also possible, but they don't get the feedstock actually, because they need a certain kind of feedstock and it's not really existing.
Yeah, I agree.
To go back to that point that Mark alluded to earlier, what he said is over 95% of the feedstock that we use for recycled polyester is going to disappear, just full stop. When we get deposit return schemes set up in operation, us proud Brits are way behind the curve on that, so they're not getting it from Britain. But the Germans, for instance, are a lot more advanced. But the whole of Europe will come up to date with a deposit return scheme for the bottles, and that will see the lack of recycled polyester coming onto the market. Recycled polyester is still the biggest proportion of material of use in this market. We're going to lose our primary feedstock unless we can develop better textile recycling, unless we can change to other materials, whether they're bio-based or polyamides. There's going to be an amount of change going on, and if you're not aware of it, you could be left behind. But Mark, coming back to this thing, EU green claims. Now, I know that we have a very cynical view, but we realise that it's legislation and we have to comply to it. EU green claims is affecting us in 3 areas: eco-design module, the provenance or the transparency, and the green claims. How else can we scare the audience with what's coming in on EU green claims? Sorry, how else can we make the audience more aware and better prepared?
They need to go out and find out what's coming. The Green Deal is a massive thing. It's not even I know it's hard to explain the Green Deal. It encompasses many other things. I mean, Katie Stevens yesterday said she's aware of 42 laws, legislations, whatever coming out of the EU, but a lot of that's to do with REACH.
42 for our industry.
I'm aware of 7 that affect circularity in fashion and textiles directly, and some of them sometimes it contradicts itself. So the green claims thing says you can't make a claim that you can't prove, and that you shouldn't make claims based on generic life cycle data. Product environmental footprint is going to make you put a label on your product that tells people about its environmental footprint, and that's based on generic life cycle data.
PEFs are the new HIG, by the way, if you're
they've
up to date.
basically contradicted themselves, and I'm not sure that they even know how to fix that.
And what we picked up last week, you didn't turn up, but Gio and I were in Berlin, and we've picked up the European elections are coming in next year, and there's going to be a push to get a lot of legislation through, because we're expecting the mean of the European Parliament to change to not wanting to adopt legislation like this. So there's going to be a push to get more legislation affecting our industry through before the elections. We know that's not going to be perfected legislation.
But
we're the couriers telling you of what the bad news is coming in.
it was interesting on the slide about who knew things about legislation, the Green Deal, and the owners of the companies knew more than the rest of you. Which is really good, because if your company's above a certain size, one of these directives makes you personally financially liable for any breaches of the directive. One of those is around forced labour, and the other one's just about your generic doing damage to the environment. It's quite very generic from memory. So if you're not aware of that, and it's personally financially liable, so it's not a fine on the company, it's a fine on the directors. So it's worth knowing, isn't it?
Scary.
So you can see why we have 3 grumpy men on stage, because they're a bit more aware of what's incoming. But we're still waiting for questions from the audience. Hopefully we've not stunned you into submission with the depressing news coming through. We're happy to take questions, and we might even have an idea of the answers. Because if you don't have questions, I get to pick on René again. René, on a positive side, what does the audience need to take away? If you were going to tell them to do one thing when they go back to work, what should they start with?
Yeah, besides that, this was now the most grumpiest panel I've ever been.
René and I have been on panels before, but never René, Mark and I.
No, as a takeaway, the solutions are actually there. You have seen in the presentation before. This is one solution. There are many, many more solutions out there. Solutions are there. For you, it's also important to just go out and just find also what is about the Green Deal, what is coming up. So it's all been in the internet. You can find it out, and please read it and please try to understanding it. And if you don't understand everything in detail, no problem. So there are people who will help you on that.
If you want to know more and you are members of the EOG, they've created a mapping document. Speak to Katie, I'm sure she'd share it with you and talk it through with you.
Katie Stevens, Head of Sustainability at European Outdoor Group, who was here yesterday. Watch her presentation on playback at the end of the month. But Mark, is that your one thing they should take away?
There was so much there to unpack, isn't there? But I think if you're not familiar with the legislation that's coming, you need to be. You need to maybe figure out, does anybody know the difference between a European directive and a European regulation? Go on then.
Barry, can we bring you the microphone? You shouldn't stick your hand up. If you want to answer it, I'll be out there. Mark, do you want to help? Rather than just me running to oh no, Barry's coming down for it. I like this. Second tip, don't let Charles find out what your name is, otherwise I name you with a microphone.
Directive. All right, this is how I'm doing it when I'm teaching it myself. I hope I got this the right way around. So a regulation is something you have to do. So I say you have to brush your teeth twice a day, in the morning, in the evening, non-discussion. That's what I say to my 9-year-old. And directive is more like a GPS system. You have a destination to get to. How you get there, whether you get there on bike or ship or car, it doesn't matter. There's a time and a destination, and you need to be there. But you're flexible about how you get there.
That's actually really good.
Sort of. A directive says what they want you to do, and each individual nation passes its own law to implement that. So in the old days of the PP directive, in France it was 7 pages long, and in Britain it was 42 pages long, because we did it differently. But a regulation, the law is produced by the Commission, and and that law has to be adopted in every country. So.
The fun way.
And if we pass it back to the instigator of the whole thing, what do you want the audience to do? What's their take-home priority that they need to initiate? Other than never listen to grumpy white men.
Exactly. Do not repeat what already has been said about get to know what the chain of custody mass balances actually can do for you. But let me close down like this. If we talk about sustainability, what I hope is that people look at that from a overall perspective, let's say from a global perspective, from a collective perspective, okay? Don't look at it from your own company point of view. Yes, we saw a lot of focus on recycled materials, but we also have to be realistic. That's coming, that's necessary, it takes some time. And there are things that we can do tomorrow, but solutions are already there. And do not forget those are the solutions that are available in bulk and can make a global impact.
But I've got one other thing to say, Charles. We've talked a lot about materials.
Mark, I've said one thing.
Talked a lot about.
I'm allowed the Dutch not to understand what one thing is.
We talked about chain of custody, we talked about materials, we talked about sustainability. But to be sustainable, it's about more than those materials. Don't forget the 400 million people that work in the fashion supply chain around the world, they need to be paid properly, they need to not be abused. So social aspects are equally as important, but they're easily forgotten about.
Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up. Can I ask you to show your appreciation for my colleagues on the dais at the moment? Other than letting René go and have a comfort break, because he's now spent 2 hours up here, Mark, Gio, and the four of us are going to be around for the next 5 to 10 minutes to the side of the stage, because Hugh, it wants us off the stage. We have an optimistic presentation coming in, which is why we balanced it. We thought we'll bring Hugh in, everyone will be really happy having listened to him. Short, sharp, and you will be smiling. So we're going to come back in about 5 minutes' time and get Hugh on stage. But thank you for listening.